Hey there everyone, it's Jenna. Welcome or welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I figured we would do a little bit of something different. This year has been full of a lot of change for us personally, and I feel like within this year, I've learned a lot of lessons, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of compile them into a list and just kind of share some of the things I've learned this year. Some of them are more insightful, some are more random, but I just thought it'd be kind of a fun video as I reflect on the year and we go into our new chapter of life. So just a little something different. So here goes. Okay, so one of the things that I learned this year was that a house is really just a shell. And what I mean by that is when we had our Charlotte house all decorated and styled, I loved how it looked. It truly was such a dream home for us, and we were so fortunate to make it look exactly how we wanted. And for so long, it was hard to leave that house because I convinced myself that I would never find a house as nice as that one. But what I learned was when we moved everything out of that house and when all of our furniture and decor was gone, what I saw was just a blank shell staring back at me. And don't get me wrong, it was still nice. Like, we had nice flooring and white walls and new windows, etc. But it just looked so plain and basic. And I realized what made that house so special was the decor and the furniture and the intention and thought behind all of the furnishings and just the function of the space itself. And what solidified this even further was when we moved into our rental here in Arizona. Again, we had nice floors and white walls, and I was able to make that space feel so cozy with simply furnishing it and swapping out a couple of light fixtures. And it's kind of the same thing as when you go and tour a model home or an apartment home and the model just looks so nice, so inviting and homey, and then you go into your unit and it just kind of feels, you know, very basic and not at all what the model looked like. That's because so much thought and intention has been put behind the decorating in that space. So that was just kind of something I learned. I feel like when everything was cleared out of the house, it's like, wow, this is just like a blank white shell, you know, nice floors and white walls. And really that's kind of all you need as a base, and you can really elevate it from there. Okay, so something else that I learned this year is to always take the extra time and effort. This was a really big one this year, and there were so many moments when I was faced with something that I wanted to do that took extra time and effort and usually extra money. And it's so easy to just say, that makes things more complicated, or that's too expensive, we'll just skip it. But looking back on this year, I can really say that it's almost always worth it to do the extra thing. For example, I really did not like the kitchen floors in our rental when we moved in, and I went back and forth on covering them up with peel and stick tile because it would have taken me a full weekend to do, and it was still pretty pricey. Even though it was peel and stick, it was like $300 to $400 to do the entire kitchen, and I wasn't sure how long we would be here for, but Mike actually convinced me to do it, and honestly it was so worth it because it made such a difference in the space. And when you're really comfortable and happy in your home, I feel like that really reflects on your mood. It was also a new experience getting to use peel and stick, which I'd never done before, and I also got a lot of feedback where other people felt inspired to do the same thing in their space. So that really made me feel like it was worth all of the extra time, effort, and money. And another example is on our cross-country drive when we drove out from Charlotte to Phoenix. We were debating if we wanted to just drive in big chunks and spend less time in hotels and just get out here quickly, but we decided to take the extra time to spread out our trip and stay in some cities that we might otherwise not have gotten to experience, and it was so worth it. We made it so that we only drove like 4 to 5 hours per day, and we were really intentional about sightseeing in each city that we went to, and that trip was so memorable for us. And not only is it exciting to move across the country, but making fun memories while you do that was so priceless for us, and that week is something that we will always remember just to have made some really unique memories from. So even though it was extra time we had to take off of work and money we had to spend on hotels and activities that we had to plan, even though it was very exhausting, like you're driving all day and then you jump right into sightseeing, you sleep for a very short period of time, and then you get back on the road. Like, I don't remember that part at all. I just remember all the fun memories when I look back on it. This doesn't always have to apply to trips or anything fancy. Sometimes it's just if you're in the middle of a busy work day and you see see your friend calling you and you think, oh, I'll call them later. It's just about taking the extra time and effort to answer that and spend some time with your friend on the phone and catch up and see what's going on, or a family member. You know, I've always found that taking the extra time and effort, while it can be exhausting and it can leave you feeling more tired, it can also leave you feeling a lot more fulfilled. And I think that this was something that was really put into perspective for me when we lost Mike's mom to cancer 2 years ago. It really does just wake you up to how short life is. And you know, I do think there are so many times when we just take the weeks for granted, and at the end of the day, none of us really know how much time we have left. If I only had a week left, would I want to look back on my life and just say I worked myself to the bone and I didn't call my friend back and I didn't take the extra time to do the things that I wanted to while I was on vacation? I really think about that a lot more. And this year, I feel like we were really intentional about living that out, and it really did make a big difference. Okay, so this next one might be a little bit controversial. It might not be what's right for everybody, but I found for me, this is really what helps me to thrive and is something that, you know, I now value a lot more. So I always thought a slow and simple life was something that I should be striving for. So while we were out in Charlotte, I really tried to simplify things and just live a comfortable, slow life. And some of that really truly did bring me joy. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't strive for a slow, simple life, but what I found was that comfort really started to rob me of experiences and adventure. For me personally, I'm not saying that there's not value in a slow, simple life, but for me, what brought me even more joy was a life of challenge and making good use of my time here on this earth to work towards goals and dreams that I have. Even though sometimes that's really difficult and uncomfortable to do, I got so much more joy and happiness out of taking risks and putting hard work in every day towards my goals than I did living a slow and comfortable life with no growth. And I learned that trusting your gut is so important, and following your passions won't ever disappoint you. There might be times when you're like, what the heck am I doing? There might be some super intense moments of self-doubt, but in the end, I've learned to just trust the process. For example, we were so comfortable in that Charlotte house. The whole house was beautiful. I had my gorgeous garden. We were close to family, but our gut was just telling us that that was not where we were supposed to be. And we truly battled that for so long just because it was so incredibly difficult to leave that comfortable life that we had there. Even after we made the decision to leave, it was super difficult. I came out here to, you know, look for rentals and everything. Mike had to stay back and work. So I was out here, and I remember having like a borderline panic attack and calling him and being like, oh my gosh, like it's not too late. We don't have to list our house for rent. Like, let's just stay, because I was really having trouble visualizing us leaving that comfortable life that we had in Charlotte with that beautiful home. I was getting really nervous and starting to panic about it. So the reason I'm saying this is because it's not always super easy and clear. Like, following your gut sometimes is really, really hard. And obviously now that we're on the other side, we have bought our dream home, we're on the other side of it. But I just want to tell you guys that there were some extreme moments of self-doubt. So it's not always like, yay, we followed our gut and, you know, now we're at the end of the rainbow. Like, there's some really hard times in between there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is those hard times are really what you get to look back on and feel super fulfilled by, and see your growth and gain self-trust in yourself, and that makes you more confident, and it makes you more willing to take risks and make changes in the future. And I just really feel like a life of growth and change is something that is so valuable and brings me personally so much joy. And looking back on my life, there were 3 really hard decisions for me where I had a hard time making them, and they seemed so difficult at the time, but looking back, those are the things that like propelled my life forward, and I couldn't imagine not making those decisions now, because they put me in great positions of success and just gave me a really fulfilling life. One of those things was moving out to become a flight attendant. I had a lot of people in my ear being like, you have a college degree, why would you just, you know, throw that away and go be a flight attendant? And like, for me, my values, I just wanted to travel. I just wanted to, you know, experience something new. I didn't really care about money and success. And truly, those were some of the best years of my life. Just getting to fly around to different countries and different states that I had never seen before, going to national parks. Like, those were such highlight reel moments of my life. And I trusted my gut on that one, and I didn't really let other people's opinions sway me. So that was one of the hard decisions that I made. Another one was actually to quit flight attending, because I do believe that there's chapters in life that we go through where things serve us for a certain amount of time, and then, you know, it can be time for a change, and that change can be really, really hard, especially when something has been so positive for us for so long. So I remember feeling sick to my stomach every single day when I knew that it was time to quit flight attending, because I had started content creation and I really did not have time for both. So I knew I had to pick one. And the question that I always asked myself was, what's the alternative? If I don't make this change, what is the alternative? And the answer to that question is I would have stayed a flight attendant and wondered what it would have been like to pursue my passion full time. And if you're not okay with that answer to what's the alternative, then you know you just got to take the leap. And same thing when we moved from Charlotte to Phoenix, you know, we kind of got to a point where we asked ourselves, what's the alternative if we just stay in this house? And our answer was, we're always going to wonder what it would have been like if we moved to Phoenix, and we weren't okay with that. So obviously, you know, you don't want to be stressed out and making life changes all the time and constantly have way too much on your plate. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that taking risks and being uncomfortable and embracing the unknown gave me so much more fulfillment than a slow and comfortable life with no growth. Okay, so this next one is a little bit more random than insightful, but I did get a lot of you guys asking to do garden updates and garden tours, and I just did not have time with our move and everything, but I figured I'd kind of talk about gardening as a whole and what I learned this year, because gardening really is just trial and error. For me personally, you're never gonna be a perfect gardener with a green thumb who knows exactly what to do. It really is about learning what does well and what doesn't do well, and then learning from your mistakes and applying that to new plants. So something that I learned this year is that gardening in the desert is hard. Back in Charlotte, we started from scratch with our backyard, and we were able to plant a gorgeous rose garden with hydrangeas and olive trees, and everything just kind of grew effortlessly. I rarely had to water things because all of the regular rainfall that Charlotte gets, and none of my garden was on irrigation. It just seemed to thrive on neglect even, honestly. And I planted my beautiful hydrangeas and evergreen trees, and I just loved all of the rosemary that made the garden smell so good, and I used it in my cooking whenever I wanted. And Charlotte really was where I found my love for gardening, and that was one of the harder parts for leaving for me, was just having to leave behind the beautiful garden that we established and having to start all over. But honestly, I was really excited to have a warmer climate and not have to deal with the freezes and the dormant season. So when I got here, I established a container garden in our rental, since I couldn't plant things in our landlord's yard, obviously. And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of those plants did not survive. I will say that there were several factors that contributed to that. And one was that I planted everything in the heat of the summer, which you're definitely not supposed to do. So if I had to do it again, I would wait until the spring or the fall and not stress my plants out by transplanting them in the summer. And I was just really excited when I got here to have some plant babies in my own backyard, so I just went for it. But I would definitely wait for some more mild weather next time. And another thing that contributed to the desert garden failure was the fact that it was a container garden. Typically, plants do a lot better in the ground where they're a bit more insulated, and container plants usually dry out really quickly, which is not great in an already hot and dry climate like Phoenix. So I'm gonna keep on experimenting and learning when we get to our new home, and I can plant some things in the ground and maybe do some more experimentation with native plants. But I will say it was not all failure. I did have some successes. I planted some bougainvillea that grows so well here, and honestly, it seems to thrive on neglect. So I've had a lot of luck with that. It adds such a pretty pop of color to the garden, and it blooms year round, which I love. I also had one of my iceberg roses make it through the summer. One of them struggled, and that one's doing okay. It doesn't have any flowers, but it's trying. And the other one though is thriving, and it smells so good. I love the soft touch of cream that it adds to my garden. And also all of my olive trees are still going strong, which is awesome, because if you follow my channel, you know that those are some of my favorite plants. I just love the rustic Mediterranean feel that they have. So I'm super happy that those thrive out here. And also I planted a lime tree this year, which has a ton of little budding limes on it. It's nice that I can have lime and citrus trees out here year round. So that is a plus for desert gardening. And I also had success with some succulents that I planted in a totem pole cactus that I found on Facebook Marketplace. So that's doing really well. So some successes and some failures, but I definitely learned that here in the low desert, I need to be more mindful of what I plant, when I plant it. And really that was the whole point of starting my container garden in this rental, was just to see what worked and what didn't. And that's just gardening in a nutshell anyways. So definitely had some lessons in the garden this year as well. And one of the last things that I want to talk about that I learned, as cliche as it sounds, is life is about the journey, not the destination. When I turned 18, my mom framed a poem for me called The Station by Robert Hastings. And at the time I was an 18-year-old, a teenager, it didn't really sink in. But I feel like this year I have looked at that poem over and over, and I've seen it to be really true in my own life, especially this year, because it's so easy to tell ourselves, oh, when I get that new car, when I graduate, when I get the promotion, things will be great once I reach that goal. You kind of forget that life is really lived in those in-between moments. And if you're constantly just living for the next thing, you lose sight of what's in front of you. And I feel like we've had a lot of big changes this year. So it's kind of been for us, it's like, oh, once we get out to Phoenix, oh, once we get settled in our rental, oh, once we find a house, oh, once the renovations are done, it's always the next thing and the next step. And it can really rob you of the joy of the present moment if you're constantly just like, oh, well, I'll have the joy once that's done. Like, obviously you want to make goals and work towards them, but you don't want to view them as the only way to happiness. You want to view the journey as the happiness and the goal as just like the icing on the cake. So I'm gonna leave you guys with a little visual that I made to that poem. I actually made it in January of this year. So I just want to leave you with that thought, but I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful new year and that we all learn fun and new things in 2025.
Tucked away in our subconscious minds is an idyllic vision. We see ourselves on a long, long trip that almost spans the continent. We're traveling by passenger train, and out the windows we drink in the passing scenes. But uppermost in our minds is the final destination. On a certain day, at a certain hour, we will pull into the station and there will be bands playing and flags waving, and once we get there, so many wonderful dreams will come true. So we restlessly pace the aisles, waiting for the station. But sooner or later, we must realize that there is no one station. The true joy of life is the trip. The station is only an illusion, and it constantly outdistances us. When we reach the station, that'll be it. When we turn 18 or buy that new car, unfortunately, once we get it, it then disappears, and the station somehow hides itself at the end of an endless track. So stop pacing the aisles and counting the miles. Instead, climb more mountains, watch more sunsets, and laugh more and cry less. Life must be lived as we go along, and the station will come soon enough.